ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
It's a tale of two cities. One where life continues as normal. A dinner out, a sunset walk, a backgammon game on a suburban corner. And the other where bombs are falling. Parts of Beirut are now a target for Israel as it hunts down members of the militant group Hezbollah. Today, our Global Affairs editor, John Lyons, takes us to the Lebanese capital. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. John, you've been on the ground in Beirut, really getting a sense of what life is like there now that this war in the Middle East has expanded. And to give us a sense of that, just first of all, take me to this pizza place that you dined at a few nights ago. Just set the scene for us of what was going on.
Well, Sam, the other night we're staying in a Christian part of the city, Ashrafia, and so we went around, the ABC team, we went around the corner to this nice restaurant run by a man who used to live in Australia, so he's got a connection to us, and we were sitting there having dinner after a fairly busy day of working, and suddenly there was a whole lot of panic outside in the streets. We could tell that something big had happened. We sort of came outside of the restaurant and there was a young man there who was on his phone, and I said, "What's going on?" And he just said, "Oh, bombing, it's just near my house." And it was about 1 kilometre from us, 2 Israeli airstrikes on a residential building just a few streets away.
The strikes hit a building in Ras Al Naba, far from Beirut's southern suburbs where most Israeli attacks have been. Some reports suggested a senior Hezbollah figure was the target of the strike.
Up until now, this part of Beirut, the Christian part, Ashrafia and other suburbs, have been relatively spared of the bombing. 22 people at least were killed in that and 117 injured. And in fact, the Hezbollah target, who the Israelis apparently were after, was not killed.
So, John, let's have a look now at how the Israelis are determining which areas to target, including in a really dense city like Beirut. You mentioned that there are Christian areas. We also know there are Shia Muslim areas. It's a complicated city, so just explain that for me.
Up until now, the Christian areas have been fairly safe. In fact, I spoke to a couple of people who work in a supermarket around the corner from me, a couple of university students, and said to them, is there much bombing going on? And they said, well, not around here. It's in the Muslim areas, and they pointed towards the southern suburbs. And I said, what would happen if Hezbollah people came into this neighbourhood? And the young woman just said, we wouldn't let them. We'd chase them away. And so at the moment, the most dangerous situation you can be in Beirut is if you happen to be walking down the street or sitting in a cafe and a Hezbollah person comes in. You may or may not realise that they are, but they could be someone who the Israelis are after. From the moment you arrive here, you hear drones. You hear and see Israeli drones, and those drones are your constant companion in Beirut. You'll often be walking down the street and you'll hear them. And when you hear them very loudly or seemingly close to you, that's, of course, a cause for great concern. And what those drones are doing through their cameras, through AI, through facial recognition, they are searching the city constantly, hunting for senior Hezbollah commanders, officials or fighters. And if it locks on them, if it finds them, that's when a strike usually follows.
So the Israeli military wouldn't normally target these Christian areas because they're not supporters or they wouldn't be Hezbollah members.
That's right. I've been surprised by the tale of two cities here. Sometimes we do go out at night for a walk around here, the ABC team, and there'll be people out with their dogs, or there'll be people at the cafe or sitting on the street playing backgammon. And life appears, if you just walked down that street, you'd think, yes, this was a normal city. This is Beirut at its normal best. But in fact, a few streets away, you can hear the drones. And there was one night here where there was about 30 bombs through the night in the southern suburbs. That's out one side of our hotel. But if you went out the back entrance and walked the other way, there's a supermarket going on selling the cheeses and olives and, people are trying to conduct their lives here as normally as possible.
And important to note, isn't it, that not everyone in Lebanon supports Hezbollah, far from it.
Well, that's right. I've spoken to a few people who are either Christian or Sunni. Hezbollah, of course, is a Shia militant group. So Christians here in Lebanon really have no support for Hezbollah much, and Sunni Muslims are often contemptuous of Hezbollah. One young guy said to me the other day, we have two enemies, Hezbollah and Israel. And so a lot of Lebanese are really, torn, conflicted as to what their view is of this current war. They don't want to see their country attacked. They're appalled by the civilian death toll. But some of the younger Lebanese have said to me, we are pleased if Hezbollah is under pressure, if Hezbollah is losing some of its weapons. Because of the Israelis, we're pleased about that because Hezbollah is too powerful. It is a power in its own right.
Must be quite terrifying to be there. So just tell me, John, parts of Beirut, the capital, are being targeted by Israel, but still really it's the south of Lebanon that the fighting is most intense, right? The Israelis say they're trying to make the north of Israel safe for residents who've had to flee because of the continued bombardment from Hezbollah since October 7, and that's really still in the south, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. The ground fighting, which is becoming really entrenched and really nasty, apparently, the clashes down there are right on that border, as you say. About 60,000 Israelis who lived in the north of Israel, up near the border with Lebanon, after October 7, Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel to support Hamas and their war in Gaza. So a lot of those Israelis evacuated from the north and moved into hotels and other accommodation towards the centre of Israel to get away from that. It appears now what Israel is trying to do on that border is to create a buffer so that for, say, 10, 20 or 30 kilometres inside Lebanon, the Israeli army appears to be trying to clear that area of any Hezbollah presence, Hezbollah weapons, etc. And so they are saying that until they remove that immediate Hezbollah threat on the border, that those 60,000 Israelis can't return to their homes.
And they're even urging UN peacekeepers to leave that area.
There's a crisis happening with the UN peacekeepers. There's been now at least 3 confrontations by the Israelis. An Israeli tank fired at the peacekeepers. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is telling the United Nations that those peacekeepers must leave, and they are now spending a lot of their time, those peacekeepers, in bunkers.
We regret any harm done to UNIFIL personnel, and the IDF is doing its utmost to prevent such incidents. But the best way to ensure the safety of UNIFIL personnel is for UNIFIL to heed Israel's request and to temporarily get out of harm's way.
The UN is saying we have a mandate from the Security Council to be here. Those UN peacekeepers, they're known as UNIFIL, they have been there for years, essentially trying to separate Israel from Hezbollah.
5 UN peacekeepers have actually been injured in recent days.
That's right.
What about, John, the civilian death toll? What do we know about the numbers on the Lebanese side at this point?
Well, just on the peacekeepers, Israel says that it has been engaging with Hezbollah in the area and that it is not intentionally fired at those peacekeepers, but it's going to have an inquiry into it. In terms of civilian death toll, we don't really yet know the complete number, but what we do know is that, as in Gaza, there's a very high ratio of civilians being killed for any Hezbollah fighters. There's a huge and growing civilian death toll here in Lebanon.
Okay, so John, what does Israel say? How long will it continue with its campaign? We know that Hezbollah is still firing on Israel's north.
A key question really is, what is Israel's agenda and what will the Middle East look like after Benjamin Netanyahu's wars? At the moment, Israel is at war or bombing Gaza, the West Bank, southern Lebanon, central Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, southern suburbs of Beirut, central Beirut, parts of Syria, and Iran could be any time. What will the Middle East look like once the Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli wars are over? I mean, it looks like, and there's pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu from the far right in his party, such as Bezalel Smotrich, the influential cabinet minister, who is saying, we will not be safe until there are settlements, Jewish settlements in some of these areas, whether it's southern Lebanon, whether it's northern Gaza. Now, there's the two very distinct views in Israel from the centre and the far right about security. The far right is the Bezalel Smotrich. They're the people in power at the moment who are driving Benjamin Netanyahu, keeping him in power and saying military force is the answer, versus those more on the centre, such as Ami Ayalon, the former head of Shin Bet, who has got a very different view. He says it's not a military solution we must go for, it's political, and that Israelis will not have security until the Palestinians have hope. So it's those two very different strands in Israel that are arguing with each other, and the military solution at the moment, the military push is winning.
And the Lebanese army is not yet involved in any of this. Would there be a point, do you think, John, that it could become involved? Because at the moment this is fighting between Hezbollah, a militant group, and Israel, not the Lebanese government or military.
Well, Sam, it's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen, where the national army, the Lebanese army, is not firing a shot. So the country is under attack. They have a foreign army has invaded across the southern border, and yet they're standing at checkpoints and doing nothing. The only fighting that Israel is confronting is from Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is more powerful than the Lebanese army. So the dysfunction of Lebanon itself, some of its political situation, is also at the heart of this. The fact that I know of no other country which, if it were invaded, would leave it up to a militant or a terrorist group, however people want to describe Hezbollah, rather than the national army.
So, John, what do the people of Beirut think will come next? How long do they think this will last for?
Most of the people in Beirut I've spoken to fear that this will be a long war. It's starting to get dug in the south of Lebanon. That could go on for a long time, that this is not going to be a quick war, and which, of course, for the Lebanese is quite traumatic. They went through that dreadful civil war from 1975 to 1990. And up until now, the view here in Lebanon had been, because of the trauma of that civil war, never again did we want our country to be at war, if possible, despite the complications and dysfunctions of Lebanese politics. However, now that is no longer a thing they can hope for. Their country now is at war.
John Lyons is the ABC's Global Affairs Editor. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen-McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.
2 years ago, someone handed me a secret recording.
You are the bloke that they're going to lock up. Let me tell you that right now.
This is Mr. Big. He's a crime boss, a kingpin.
Got coppers in every state that I pay good money to.
And on this tape, he promises to help keep his henchmen out of jail.
I'm willing to go out on a limb and fix these problems, okay?
But first, he wants the truth about a murder.
If I can fix this, you're on.
There are lots of people that don't want me asking questions about Mr. Big, but I think everyone has a right to know who he really is. Mr. Big is an explosive new season of the ABC's true crime podcast, Unravel. Search for Unravel on the ABC Listen app.